Good morning, everyone. This is Darren from SimNation. Just want to do a quick recap video around the WWPF, which is SimNation's Draft Day Sports Pro Football 2023 League. Um, if you haven't checked out this title, I highly recommend it. If you want to check out an online league, this is one of the better leagues I've ever seen. So, um, definitely, I would check this out. We are making some pretty good progress. I think we're now in week 11 of the season, and we're starting to see some really big trends develop. But again, can't say enough about this title. I definitely highly recommend it. It's grown on me. Yeah, there's some bugs out there still, but I highly recommend that if you are playing this game and you experience a bug, report it to Wolverine Studios. They will definitely take care of it, especially Brooks. He's always been quick and responsive to different issues that come up. But yeah, let's dive into what's going on. So I'm gonna do this a little differently than I have in the past. I'm gonna kind of go by the standings and talk a little bit about some of the different teams. And I'm gonna start on the NFC side because I need to give the NFC some love. I'm an AFC person, true and true, but the NFC is a place that has historically some of the most favorite teams in the NFL. In the AFC North, it's a logjam right now. Green Bay, which of course is, um, sorry about that, is DWK, and Minnesota, which is Rick Sullivan, are kind of still fighting it out. If we take a quick look at Green Bay, they're on a two-game win streak. I don't know why it's doing that, but who cares? Uh, and what you immediately notice is it's not the offense that's really doing it for him. DWK is trying to get the offense kind of under control. They do have a really good running attack led by Jesse Seaton. Um, but it's largely been their defense that's been the reason why that they are 5-4 right now and on a two-game winning streak, having beat LA and Detroit. Um, I don't really fault DWK for these two here because he lost to DP and he lost to Stewart, who are probably two of the better coaches in the league. He lost to Shark, who's again one of the better coaches in the league. So when you look at it, he's 5-4, but only one of those losses was to what I would say is a questionable team in Seattle, and Seattle's pretty strong to begin with. But Jesse Seaton, 813 yards so far this year. If you look at Seaton, he's a really solid running back. Over time, I mean, he's done pretty well. He has three 1,000 yard seasons previously. He's probably going to break that pretty easily this season with 8 rushing touchdowns. So definitely do a good job there. Minnesota, this is Rick Sullivan. Again, he's been in the league for a while. Outside of Carolina and Detroit, Detroit, of course, is having a down year with Pops. Um, Two of those losses are probably a little bit more to questionable teams. Miami is Soa. Soa is kind of up and down. Just depends on when you catch them. The Chicago Bills, not one of the better teams in the league, but I think yeah, what he does have going for him is he has some really good running backs. Again, one of the trends I think we're seeing this year in the league is some of the more successful teams are actually running the ball. Now, in the AFC, that trend's a little bit different outside of one team. In the AFC, it's a little bit more balanced, but definitely see here that Rick's offense is having a really good year. His defense is having a really good year. He just maybe had the misfortune of playing Carolina and Miami when they got a little bit hot. If you look at the stats, um, specifically the rushing, he's got a really good stable of young running backs. Both Enos and Taft are rookies. Uh, Taft was probably the more heralded running back coming out of college, but Enos was his first pick. I don't think Rick liked Enos in the beginning, but he's definitely a solid running back, and he's having a very, very solid season so far. So The AFC North really is starting to stack up to look like it's going to be Green Bay versus Minnesota the whole way through. Um, if you look at it, Green Bay is 2-0 in their division. That's going to be pretty important because it shows that they have a pretty good chance. Rick's going to have to win some games. We'll talk about upcoming games soon. In the South, it's really all Carolina. I don't expect that to really change. Um, I think that when we look at Atlanta, which is Steve, um, he's 2-8, but Atlanta had a lot of issues. So I mean, he's doing really well for the fact that he was playing a first place schedule. Um, and then two, he had to deal with the CPU just really being complete and utter shit in putting together a roster. You look at these losses, San Diego's a good team. Detroit, we talked about them. They're having a down year, but they're still a good team. Denver's a really good team. Dallas, of course, is one of the big heavyweights in the NFC. Uh, we'll talk about New York Giants. This is a story here with Cable. Philadelphia is a good team. Oakland, of course, is Oakland. So he's not going to get a break for the rest of the season, unfortunately. This is going to be a down year for him, but I think if you look at it, he is racking up the yards. He's got a good offense. His defense has just been horrible throughout the year, especially the pass defense. I do expect him to fix that and get them moving again. But I think the real story so far this year has been at Carolina um, with Invisible Witness, who's got them at 7-2. I hate that it does that. There we go. Well, he lost to Stewart and he lost Althaben, who is one of our German coaches, who's really good. He's had some issues with injuries, but again, as you look here, is Zelensky is just a complete and utter stud. He's having a really good year. Andrade, as the wide receiver, is having a good year. Their defense against the run is pretty good. They're not giving up a lot of points. And if you look at it, they have a very favorable schedule going forward. Of course, they do have Denver and Dallas. Um, he did beat Oakland. Anytime anyone beats Peter, that's a thing. So I will say that they pretty much have a pretty straight line to winning their division and likely getting to a place where I think that they will maybe be able to potentially poach one of the top seeds in the NFC. They are the top team in the NFC right now. In the East, it's really still kind of close between Dallas and New York. So this is, of course, Templar. This is Cable. Udo is there. Philadelphia, I believe, is now open. Um, so yeah, Philadelphia is open. I need to fix that. Um, so when you look at this, you have Dallas, which of course is Templar. James Martin is just a phenomenal quarterback, by the way. Take a quick look at him. He's having a really good year. I mean, 68% of his passes, he's only thrown 4 interceptions. Um, this is a guy who I think a lot of him. And again, the loss to New Orleans was kind of a shock, but he lost to Baltimore, who's not a bad team, by the way. That's Kevin. And then lost to Pittsburgh by 7, which is really good. Bounced back and beat Washington. And then if you look at it the rest of the way, he's got to win the games against New York uh, to keep in it. And he's got that big game in Week 14 with Invisible Witness. But it's a manageable schedule going forward. If he can win those games, he definitely will likely be able to poach one of those top 2 spots, which is, I think, what his goal is. This is kind of the story here. Is this was the worst team last year, and yeah, they're 4-5, but Cable drafted a lot of people. He's done a really good job of rebuilding that team and getting stuff out of them. They did lose to Cincinnati. The Tampa Bay loss was probably stinging, but did beat Bio Eagle, who is always a tough get. Beat Steve. Um, So he's got some wins. Again, not an easy schedule either. I mean, you got Pittsburgh, you ended up with Carolina, Cleveland, and then you get Baltimore. Plus, you still got to play Dallas. If he can win the games against the Redskins, the remaining game against the Redskins, and then take two from the Eagles, he likely may be able to sneak into the playoffs. But I mean, an 8-8 season is possible, and that's a good rebound from where he was last season. So definitely great job there, Cable. Uh, this one is interesting. There's only really one human team, I think, if I remember correctly, in this league, and that is San Francisco. If you really want to look at joining us, Arizona, LA, Seattle, all good teams. Seattle's not showing it, but they are actually a good team. But Stewart kind of had a little bit of a slow start. He had the 2 weeks where he lost to Don. Don was still there, by the way, and then lost to Rick, who's having a really good season at Indianapolis. And then lost to Arizona. That was a little bit of a shock. But he's since put it back together and he's got the team moving. He's doing it on the ground. We'll take a look at that in a second. But he's got the best pass defense in the entire league, which is no shock. He's always been good at that. But definitely, I think he will outlast likely Arizona. Um, and definitely win this division. So Castile and Rosa are two of the running backs that he's using. If we look at Arizona, Arizona for a while was actually Don, but again, they're doing it on the ground as well. They have Moulton and Taft. That's the different Taft, by the way. And that's definitely helping them. And then, of course, Carrier's just a solid quarterback who doesn't really make mistakes. So, if we look at the NFC and we think about it right now, Carolina and Dallas kind of are potentially got the best line of sight into grabbing the 1 and 2 seed. Uh, San Francisco and Arizona likely are going to be in the playoffs. LA has an outside shot. New York has a shot at it still. And then up here, it's just a battle of attrition between Green Bay and Minnesota to see who's going to get it. Um, so right now, I think Green Bay has kind of the clearer line of sight to the divisional title. Down here, I think Dallas has it. Carolina definitely has it. And then these two are going to battle it out to see who gets it. So still pretty wide open race for the number 1 and number 2 seed, which gets you a bye versus being a wild card team. So we're going to flip this. We're going to go from bottom to top. Uh, in the West, Oakland's had an up and down season, but they're having a really good season still. 7-3 is nothing to write home about for Peter, but it's what most people would really like to have. They lost to Pittsburgh, that's a real loss, and then of course New York and Carolina. We talked about Carolina. We'll talk about New York. Pittsburgh, of course, is having a good year too. But Peter's starting to get his feet under him. He's had injury issues, by the way, which have kind of slowed him down a little bit. Um, but I think Denham is turning out to be the quarterback he hoped he was. Leonard already was a great running back, and can't say enough about Michael Brooks. He's actually one of the best wide receivers in the league. I know DP's gonna take offense at that, but I mean, when you look at his production, you can't argue that. Those years in Tennessee didn't really do him justice. Ever since he's been under Peter, he is definitely an elite wide receiver. And if we look at Denham, who is a former Ohio State quarterback, he had a really bad rookie season. But I mean, you can't underscore this. 24 touchdowns against 1 interception. He's completing 62% of his passes. He was injured for part this year already. When he's on the field, he really could be the next Reynolds. He's just that good. Andrew Leonard, of course, is just one of Peter's type of running backs. He's just going to produce. So I do like Oakland to win this division. Denver's playing for the playoff spot. I don't think they're going to catch Oakland. They lost to Althoffen in this last game, but they have solid wins as well. So They'll get Pittsburgh in week 14. They got a crucial matchup with Carolina in week 13. Of course, they got the Raiders tonight. They're doing it the way they always do it, which is through the air. Lavelle is just a great quarterback, and then James Johnson is having a great season as well. The biggest problem they have is their defense, which is kind of hurting them. Bad timing for Lavelle to be hurt with Oakland coming up, and then 2 road games against Kansas City and Carolina, and then Pittsburgh at home. If we look at the rest of the division, Alt Howard wasn't really given much at San Diego. I mean, San Diego had deprecated pretty bad, but he's doing a really good job there. He lost to Pittsburgh. That's not a bad loss. Hasn't done so well against the AFC North, but he's putting together a pretty good string of wins. Carolina is a major win, so is Denver. He beats Kansas City, uh, and then he's got a pretty somewhat easy, not so easy path. So Kansas City, New Orleans, Denver are all games that he probably can win, which will get him to 7 wins. And then he's got to win at least 2 of the crucial games against Oakland, Baltimore, in New England. And those are tough games, but I think he can do it. He's already demonstrated that he can beat top teams. It's just he's going to have to win at least 2 of those remaining 4 matches against some of the top league teams. In the East, we're seeing some separation with New York. I do think that right now the race for the 1 and 2 is Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, and New York. I don't know that I see where Oakland's going to slip into that picture for 1 and 2, which is going to make a lot of people upset because you do not want Peter coming in to the playoffs through the wild card. Um, of course, he'll win his division, but he'll have to play on wild card weekend. Um, New England's fallen back a little bit. Miami has fallen back quite a bit. But I will say that right now it's New York's to lose, which isn't a shock. New York has a really strong team this year. Of course, the only loss was to Pittsburgh. They did beat Oakland, and generally they are just blowing people out right now. They have a bye this week, but then of course they play New England on Tuesday, get Rick at Minnesota, get the other Rick at Indianapolis, get Shark again. So this will determine whether or not they're going to be a top 1 or 2 seed. This is a pretty crucial series of games for them. They've got to beat Shark. If they don't beat Shark, Shark has the potential to leapfrog them, and that has happened before. Minnesota is not as strong as probably Rick would like to have them, but they're still pretty strong. And Indianapolis is a really strong team. So, of course, they're doing it through the air. There's no shock there. That's how they always have done it. They have probably the second best defense in the league, and the defense is really showing up. Spriggs is, of course, Spriggs. He's one of the best in the league, especially with Reno on the tail end of his career. Terrell Bryant is definitely paying some dividends for them. And then Jonathan Roberts, just in general, and I'll show you this, is the wide receiving core is just phenomenal. So if you look at this, Spriggs is 28 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and over 3,200 yards. And yeah, he was hurt as well this season. Um, and then on the ground, Bryant's having a good year with 11 touchdowns. He's not the top running back in the AFC, though. I don't care what DP says. There's a running back that wears the black and gold that is much better than he is. But Roberts, the combination of Roberts, Burton, and Martin is it's lethal. Um, and I'll talk a little bit in another video about how I stopped them. I did some things on defense that you have to do against fast wide receivers. These guys are really, really fast. And if you don't account for it, he's just going to maul you. Um, and like with Peter, what he did is, I'm not going to try to stop Peter. I'm just going to run past him. And he was able to do it because you look at this, right? Martin has 98 speed. 98 fucking speed. That that's just unheard of. Um, And that is, you can't really defend against that unless you're playing some form of a zone. Uh, Jonathan Roberts has 93 speed. Bear in mind, there aren't that many quarterbacks that have speed above 94. I could probably look, and I'm willing to bet you I'm counting on one hand. Richard Sullivan, two hands actually, very fast, 92 speed. So these guys are really hard to deal with because they're so fast. And then you throw in someone like Burton, who doesn't have the speed, but he's got the agility. He's got Como, who's got the speed and the agility. You're already playing behind when you play them. It's really hard to play against them. You have to do some things that you're not going to be willing to do traditionally. New England, of course, this is Shark. Shark had a rough 2 game stretch where he lost to the Ricks. He was undefeated before then, but he bounced back and beat Miami. He's had some injury issues. Losing Allman definitely hurts, but Hicks is having a pretty good year. This was his #1 pick in Eric Herrera, who's having a good year as well. But when you look at this, it doesn't really stand out. His defense is pretty good against the run. He's got a really good rushing attack with Hicks. But I do think that if he can get Allman healthy before the Jets game, he's got a pretty good chance. And he's actually got a easier schedule than DP does because he gets the Bills. Of course, he's got to win those games against the Jets, but he gets the Bills and the Jaguars and the Chargers. That's much easier than what we saw when we looked at DPs. So those two are going to fight it out. Whoever wins, if they split it, it's going to the Jets. If Shark wins both of them, it'll be the Patriots likely who will be representing the East and maybe be capable of grabbing that 1 or 2 seed. Um, but if, of course, that the Jets win it, they've got it. But they may not get a 1 or 2 seed because, as you can see in the South, it's pretty much all Rick in Indianapolis. You do have Starfinder there, you have JP there. We have a new coach joining who's taking over the Titans. So we'll have all 4 teams here that will have coaches. Um, you can't say enough about Indianapolis. Indianapolis is just having a phenomenal season. Yeah, they lost to Arizona. That's kind of a little bit of a blemish uh, on their season so far. They're not playing a ones schedule. They're playing a twos schedule. Again, just quick explanation. If you're the top team in your division, you play against all the other top teams, as well as whatever division that you're playing against. But Edward Luna's having a really good season. He's 7th in passing yards, 8th in points per game. He's got a pretty good defense as well. But really, it's been Luna who was a trade that was made, I think, with Miami, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, though. Yeah, they made a trade earlier. It was a pretty criticized trade in some regards. Actually, no, I'm thinking of a different one. This was a good trade, and he got a quarterback who's just doing wonders for him. And I mean, Luna spent quite a bit of time in Miami. Wasn't the best of stats, but definitely was the right tools for Rick, who is really using him well uh, at Indianapolis. And can't say enough. They've got a really strong chance of being a 1 or 2 seed. I would probably say they probably have the best schedule to get to a 1 seed of any of the teams in the AFC right now. So, I mean, they should be able to beat Houston. They got Seattle, who's a tough get, but they should win that. Really, the hardest game they've got coming forward is New York. Now, I'm going to hold off on Tennessee because we do have a new human owner coming in, and nobody knows how that's going to look. I will say Jacksonville has a phenomenal defense. Uh, they have lost a couple games very closely. And again, these are losses that, when you think about it, this is the DP, this is the bio, this is to, I'm sorry, this is JP, this is DP, Stuart, Rick. Starfinder's having a good season. It's just he's losing to some of the top teams. Um, I don't know that I see a path for Starfinder to make it to the playoffs, unfortunately, but who knows? He's got the schedule that could actually work in his favor. But I think if you're looking at it right now, is The divisions are largely going to be run by Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, either New England or New York or New England, and either of those teams will be in the playoffs. Oakland and Denver will likely go into the playoffs. So yeah, there's still an opening. Will Baltimore, Jacksonville will likely, and San Diego will likely fight it out for those remaining spots. In the North, so far it's been all Pittsburgh. Baltimore's having a good season with Kevin at the helm. Bio Eagle is up and down, but he's doing pretty well. If we take a quick look at Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh is doing it on the ground, which is going back to the formula that I used before when Hollingsworth was still young and I had really good running backs. So that's how they're winning, and they're winning by defense. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, Pittsburgh doesn't have the easiest schedule. Also, the injuries are starting to rack up on the defense, which is something to worry about. I mean, I don't even have a free safety to start right now. I'm playing a strong safety and a fast linebacker. But they get Cincinnati. That's a win. And then they have a relatively straightforward schedule. They should be able to beat Udo in Washington, get by Prince at Denver, and then these are always the hard games for me. Bio Eagle always plays me tough, uh, and while they did shut down Baltimore, I have a lot of respect for Kevin as a coach. The best running back in the league right now, and I'm sorry guys, is Michael Lackey. The only problem Lackey has is I won't give him the ball near the goal line because of the way I run my offense, which has hurt him. But the guy's averaging over 100 yards a game. You can't take that away. That's pretty amazing, especially with the quality of the opponents he's faced off against so far this year. With the Jets, Oakland, Dallas, he's earned it. Hickson, I can't say enough about him. He's a really great person to have on your line, and kind of is one of the genesises for this defense. When we look at Baltimore, I know Kevin's getting a little frustrated, but I mean, he lost to Oakland. That's Peter. This was kind of what loss, but it happens. Denver's a really good team. His secondary is not as good as it could be, which is how Denver got past them, and then Pittsburgh just ran over them. But it's not helping that he doesn't have his top quarterbacks. Pittsburgh hurt Merrick. Murray was hurt coming into that game. He's got another 1 to 2 weeks. The good news is he gets a game that he can probably win with his third string against Bio Eagle, and then gets Cincinnati, New York. The schedule the rest of the way is relatively conducive to him making the playoffs if he can get Murray healthy. Betts is a good running back, but I think the challenge with Betts is you have to have a very specific system for him. Um, I could probably focus on that, but when you look at his running backs, if it was me, I'd probably be looking at starting Lewis or Minor at this point um, over Betts, but you don't find many running backs that have 88 agility, but definitely I would be taking a hard look at Hinton as well. So that's kind of where we're at. If we look at the league leaders, a couple things stand out is Lavelle is leading the league in passing. You got Richmond up there. Spriggs, of course, lost a game or two because he was hurt. Luna's having a great year, so is Zelensky. Those old guys definitely keep an eye on. But when we look at the touchdowns, Lavelle is just having a phenomenal year. To me, Lavelle may be a MVP candidate. Spriggs is definitely in that conversation, so is Zelensky. Um, Rating wise, again, one of the reasons why you're not seeing Denham so much is just because he's only started 3 games. But Denham is someone to keep an eye on as well. Rushing yards, there's a pretty big difference between Lackey and Grill. And then, of course, you have Leonard. Keep an eye on Leonard. I think he's going to kind of explode as Peter gets his offense moving again. And this is kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Bryant has 11 touchdowns, but Lackey only has like 3 touchdowns. And again, that's unfortunately a byproduct of my offense. because as you can see, Arellano, who is the backup running back, has 8 because he tends to get the ball in the red zone. Receiving yards, talked about Roberts already, talked about Johnson, talked about Brooks, talked about Martin. We didn't talk about Bennett, but this is pretty wide open race. I think the only one that's going to likely catch Roberts is Johnson unless Roberts gets hurt. He's pretty much got it, and he's easily the best wide receiver in the league. I would say that I would put Roberts over Spriggs for MVP because I think Roberts is just having that good of a year. And I don't think Spriggs has that great of a year without Roberts and Martin. Points wise, Flowers, who's the kicker for Pittsburgh, is coming in at the top. Going to move past that because I don't like talking about kickers. Udo has the top tackler, but if you notice, Rick has 2 of them in there as well. Eric Labb is a phenomenal rookie. He was one of the top linebackers coming out in the draft, so definitely think highly of him. In the sacks, Kevin's done a great job with reviving Sousa. He leads the league in sacks. Hickson, of course, was hurt for a couple games, but that's no excuse. Sousa's just having a great year because you can also see Coronado, who's also at Baltimore, is having a pretty good year. But Hickson and Sousa are 2 guys to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on Garber. He's going to make a push here shortly. And then, of course, in the interception bucket, there's not much to say here. Tolo is a really good person, but Swafford is someone I actually thought would have more interceptions by this point. We should see that at some point. So, what are we kind of looking at for the second half of the season, or for the remaining 4 or 5 weeks? 5 weeks, actually. I think what you're going to want to see is some separation. So, Hill, Green Bay, and Minnesota. Again, I do like DWK, but I think Rick is going to make it to the playoffs. Carolina's got a clean shot at the number 1 seed. Dallas is going to try to disrupt them in that. And then, of course, you've got DWK, who also is trying his best to stay in the picture. And then Arizona and San Francisco are going to battle it out with LA a long shot. The number 1 seed is really up in play on the AFC. So it's right now between Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, and New York. New England could slide into that conversation. Whereas Baltimore, Jacksonville, Miami, Denver, and San Diego are playing for the playoff spots. So that's it. We still have some really good CPU teams out there, like Chicago. We've got Seattle, Arizona. We got Cincinnati. We have Buffalo, and we have Kansas City, all who are really strong teams that if you're interested in joining this league, I would highly recommend it. I am going to do the videos on defense. I got to work on those a little bit more, but this was just a quick recap. Thanks.